Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie Ekman, and I'm the Director of Curriculum for the Interboro School District. Pleased to welcome you to this evening's virtual event, Children's Friendships During COVID-19 and Beyond, What Every Parent Needs to Know. So before we start this evening, I just wanted to go over a few features of the webinar in case you haven't been on a webinar in the past. First, you'll see in the top right left-hand corner that it is recording. So the webinar is being recorded and will at some point in the near future be put onto our district YouTube channel, and the link will also be shared out with parents so that you can reference it at your convenience. Additionally, this is a webinar, so all that we are able to see are the panelists. So I can see Rachel, I can see Catherine. We cannot see anybody at home at this time. What we would ask you to do is to sign into the chat that is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So there's a chat feature there. If you can sign in, and when you sign in, we would ask you to indicate your name, your student's name, and the school that your child or children attend. Again, in the chat, we're looking for your name, your student's name, and the school that your child attends. Also, you'll see there that there's a Q&A section. So if at any point during the presentation you have a question that jumps out at you, if you can put that into the Q&A section. And just so you know, on the chat, when you're signing in, only Rachel and Catherine and I can see the chat, so the chat isn't viewable to all participants when you're indicating your name and your child's school and your child's name, but the Q&A is available to all participants. So anything that you enter into that Q&A when you're asking questions, that will be available for all participants to see. We will be holding those questions until the end, and then Rachel will be facilitating a Q&A session with Catherine as questions arise. So again, I said that I'm the Director of Curriculum for the district. My colleague, Rachel Lambert, is on the call as well. Rachel is the Supervisor of Special Education Services for Interboro. We're delighted this evening to have Catherine Malum with us. Catherine is a school counselor and a certified trauma practitioner with over 25 years of experience as a counselor with the school district of Haverford Township in Havertown, PA, where she currently serves as chair of the elementary counseling department. Catherine regularly speaks to parents and educators at public and independent schools and mental health agencies in the Philadelphia area about children's friendships, ADHD, executive functioning skills, and childhood anxiety. She graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in psychology from Hobart and William Smith Colleges, and earned her master's degree in education from the University of Pennsylvania. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Thank you, Rachel, both of you for inviting me, and thank you, parents, for joining us tonight. In addition to the introduction, I am the parent of two daughters who have navigated the world that your children are in some time ago. I have a daughter who is a first-year student in college and a daughter who's graduated from college. And they could not have had more vastly different experiences in elementary school with their friendships. My older daughter struggled with ADHD and anxiety, and friendships were a rough road for her in many, many ways. My younger daughter kind of sailed through her social world from the time that she was very, very little. So I've seen how it goes when it goes well for our kids' friendships. I've seen how it goes when it doesn't go well in our children's friendships. And I hope tonight to help you navigate this world. The fact that you are here or watching later really shows that you see the value, the importance to our children of their friendships. So let's get started. First of all, we know that, especially in difficult times, but always, kids look to adults for how to react in a given situation. We've all seen them as they fall down as toddlers, if they fall off their bicycle and when we're with them. The first thing they do is look up to us as if to say, am I okay? Because if you don't think I'm okay, I'm definitely going to cry. That plays out in so many ways over our children's lifetimes. They look to the adults in their world for how they should react. They look to us as the barometer for a given situation. So what do we model? Can we model that calm? Can we help them problem solve? Can we help them develop coping skills? And that's one of the themes that I kind of will carry through this presentation tonight. So just kind of to look at the global part of friendship before we get into the impact that the pandemic has had on children's friendships. We know that friendships have to be voluntary at any stage of life. No one wants a friendship that's imposed on them. PBSparents.org talks about how friendship is the gold of childhood. It is one of the only things, if not the only thing, that kids get to decide for themselves. So while our best friend may have a child who is exactly our child's age, and we think it would be the most wonderful thing for our children to be best friends too, maybe that will happen, but maybe not. And we have to honor and respect our children's choices in their friendships. We know that friendships are reciprocal. Okay, it can't be one-sided for it to be a true friendship. A friendship has to be strong, based on that strong affective tie, that connection, that ability to share and experience a warm relationship, and affection for each other. And we also know that friendship has to exist between children at similar developmental levels. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be the same age, but they have to be approximately at the same developmental level for it to be truly a friendship in childhood. So Catherine Bagwell, who's done a lot of research in recent years on friendship, says friends are not just nice to have, rather they are developmentally fundamental. Within friendships, children develop and practice critical social skills they need in current and future relationships. She goes on to say that through friendships, children seek and receive emotional support. They learn how to take another person's perspective. They learn to have empathy for another person. They learn the thrill of making another person laugh, and they practice intimacy and deeply caring for another person. Now, that word intimacy might be something we wince at, that we don't normally think of when we think about children. But by intimacy, we mean that emotional connection. And this is the first place outside of familial relationships that children really do have that sense of intimacy with another human being, that affection, that caring, that secret sharing, and so on. So what are the stages of friendship? So ages 4 to 7, which are thought of as stage 1, children really see their friends as people they spend time with and whom they share toys and activities. Personal traits are not so much a factor. So our kindergartners, for example, will more describe a friend as someone that they play with. Oh, I build Legos. He's my friend. We build Legos together. She's my friend. We ride bikes together. And they're really thinking about kind of what they do together. Ages 8 to 10, which is the age where most of your kids are, children really do begin to consider personal traits in choosing their friends, and mutual trust is a key factor. They'll describe their friendships more in terms of those personal qualities, what they like about another child, what their personality is, what they like to do, the kinds of activities, the things they have in common. And then beginning with our young adolescents and going on through up into adulthood, friendship really becomes based on that intimacy and loyalty. When we have our 4th and 5th graders describe friendships, they'll very much talk about, well, a friend is someone you can trust. A friend is someone you can depend on. Girls, we know from some of the differences in girls and boys friendships, girls will tend to focus more on those affective components of friendship as they describe their friendships. Boys don't tend to speak of those qualities as much, but these are just as important to boys as they are to girls in their friendships. So the impact of COVID on kids' friendships is something that really there is no research about yet. And I suspect there will be, and it will be fascinating. Anecdotally, what have we seen and read? What do psychologists and parents and teachers talk about? Well, certainly during lockdown last spring, some children began to feel very isolated. The parents who were calling me when schools were completely shut down last March, April, May, June, were the parents of kids who were really struggling socially. Maybe they didn't have an easy neighborhood network. Maybe they didn't have a device. and they were really lonely. Some of those residual effects still are present in many kids, depending on their circumstance and whether they're able to connect with their peers. Certainly, we've seen an increased reliance on devices and neighborhoods to connect with peers. Most of us would say that's great that kids are relying on their neighborhood friends in a way that maybe they hadn't, because they were all in different programmed activities and structured events and activities after their school day. We've certainly seen more doing together outdoor activities, and that tends to be a way that boys relate to each other in particular. But again, during this time, we've seen more girls kind of experience that outdoor playing together time because that's what was available to them. We've seen fewer opportunities for friendships to happen organically. There were no camps. The after-school programs, after-school sports have been affected. So some of those opportunities where kids would get to know people who have similar interests or similar talents have certainly been curtailed a little bit or a lot over the past year. And we know that some kids are anxious about leaving home even now. And there are some families that for lots of reasons have had to stay in virtual school. And some kids for lots of reasons have been very aware of the risks, the health risks during COVID, and they do feel anxious about getting together with friends or leaving the home. But I love that there are optimists, and I tend to be an optimist because I've taken the long view over my career. So Jack Shonkoff, who's a pediatrician and early childhood development expert at Harvard's Center for the Developing Child, says even though this is unusual, meaning this pandemic, most kids will come out of this fine because we're biologically wired to adapt. If we weren't, we would have gone extinct like dinosaurs. We wouldn't be able to survive because the environment is always changing. I know there was a lot of speculation last summer about, oh, kindergartners and first graders, they'll never wear masks. And I was one of the people saying, don't be so sure of that. Kids are remarkably resilient and adaptable. And we know that from the time they were born, they've had vaccinations regularly, or they've been strapped in, harnessed in to car seats that none of us would feel comfortable or agreeable to being in unless we're in a roller coaster. So kids have the capacity to learn and adapt. And what I have seen, and I suspect you see in your school district as well, is that kids have followed the protocols. They have done what they needed to do. And one of the driving forces for them is they want to be with their friends and their peers. They want to be in school. They want to be connected to their teachers. They, like we, are social creatures. And so they will make those difficult choices and they'll make those difficult efforts to do what they need to do in order to be with their friends. But because there is no research on this and because I can't speak for children, I asked the kids at my school, particularly the 4th and 5th graders, I gave them a little friendship questionnaire. And in the questionnaire, I asked them how much COVID-19 has affected their friendships, either a lot, a little, or not at all. I asked them for the ways that they have tended to connect with their peers during this time. I asked them if their friendships have been strengthened, how? If their friendships have been weakened, how? I asked them how their parents can help support their friendships. I asked how adults at school could help support their friendships. And then I asked them to tell one thing that they have learned about friendships because of COVID-19, one thing that COVID-19 has taught them about friendships. And I will weave some of their direct quotes into this presentation because they're very wise and insightful and poignant. So of about 180 kids that I asked to fill out this little questionnaire, 148 of them responded. And almost 58% of them, this again is 4th and 5th graders, say that the pandemic has affected their friendships a little. 23% of them said not at all, and 19.6% said a lot. This surprised me a little bit. I actually thought that more kids would say that the pandemic has affected their friendships a lot. But when I broke it down and started to ask them a little bit about how, They talked about ways that their friendships actually, in some cases, had been strengthened. They note things like more time to communicate in the absence of other commitments. And I thought that was really something I had not thought about, because their after school activities and sports and structured activities were not necessarily in the picture. Kids have had more time to just hang out, whether it's online or in their neighborhoods or in play dates that are done in a healthy way. They've had, in some ways, more ways to communicate because of devices. Some note that their friendships have flourished during this time. And many kids noted their appreciation of their friendships, their gratitude. They place a higher value and an intentional effort on sustaining their friendships because of this time. Kids who noted that some of their friendships may have been weakened talk about less time to see each other in person, of course, sometimes no device to communicate online. They note that some friendships languished or got just weakened because of lack of time together. And some of them noticed that there were some parent restrictions, either for themselves or their friends, for digital devices that may have made it hard for them to communicate with each other during that time. So there are four main ways I'm going to talk about tonight in terms of supporting your kids' friendships during COVID-19, but also beyond. The first is to consider your child's temperament, and we'll talk a little bit about what area in particular. The second is to boost social skills and create social opportunities, which are not mutually exclusive, but they are different. To balance technology, which is such a part of our kids' lives now in a way that it never was before, and to know when to get support for your child. So let's take a look first at temperament, which really is how your child approaches the world. We think of temperament as more stable over time. Personality develops over time. And Jerome Kagan years ago did research about temperament, looked at 4-month-olds, for example, putting a stimulus above them and seeing how they reacted. Did they have a high degree of reactivity? Did they startle? Did they grimace? Did they cry? Did they get upset about that stimulus? Or did they have more of a low reactivity to it? Did they gaze intently at it with lots of curiosity or wonder? And then he followed those children, and he saw that at age 7, in a social situation, the kids who had lower reactivity to that stimulus at 4 months old actually tended to have lower social anxiety. Now, that doesn't mean that the kids who were highly reactive had more social anxiety. He said it was not a correlation or direct causal kind of relationship. But he did say and did note that those kids who had low reactivity at 4 months also tended to be less socially anxious in a new social situation, even at age 7. Now, one of the greatest temperamental traits that really affects how we approach childhood is introversion and extroversion. And last spring, there was a meme going around on social media. Introverts, please put down your book and check on your extrovert friends. They are not okay. The parents I was hearing from a lot in the spring last year were the parents of the extroverted kids who really were struggling with losing their people. And I know many of my extroverted adult friends were struggling very much with losing their people. Because as we really look at the definition, the best definition I've seen about introversion and extroversion is how we recharge our battery. So ask yourself, how does your child recharge his or her battery? We know that introverts recharge by being quiet, either by themselves or with select people. We know that extroverts recharge by being with people. That is literally how they get their energy back. You know if you have an introvert, and it's more than just being shy or outgoing, it's how you recharge. You know if you have an introvert because they will come home from school pretty drained. They have expended most of their emotional energy having to navigate the social world of school, and they need their downtime. They need their quiet. They might need one special friend, or they might need to go do something by themselves. And that's how they get their energy back. Your extroverted child will come home from being in school with all those people all day long and need more people. They want to play date. They want to go outside. They want to do things with somebody. And your extroverted child will also tend to be kind of irritable or a little crabby when they're not around people. So knowing this going forward, as we start to have kids go really out into the world even more than they have been, and certainly this summer compared to last summer, our introverts might need a little bit of a nudge. Our extroverts are going to need pretty much good programming that meets their interests and their needs. So what about the socially anxious kids? So Harold Kuplovitz has talked recently about scaffolding. And think of the child as the building and the parenting as the scaffolding around it to support. We need to help our kids, especially those who are socially anxious, begin to go into that reentry period with support, with empathy, with validation, and with intervention when it's needed. Kids need now more than ever structured routines and schedules to give them a sense of security. We also need to encourage kids to get back into the social fray via exposure to human interaction. And again, if you have a child who's more socially anxious, if you have a child who may struggle with social skills, if you have a child with a disability, if you have a child with ADHD, if you have a child who's just really, really shy, you're going to need to provide that scaffolding and talk to them about what kinds of things they would like to do as the world opens up a little bit more over the coming months and certainly in the summer. So the second area is to boost social skills and create social opportunities for our kids. And this is always the case, but certainly now it takes on a little bit of a different emphasis. So when we look at social emotional learning, the CASEL, or the collaborative academic, social, and emotional learning competencies, are kind of now considered the gold standard for social and emotional learning. We talk about self-awareness, kind of being aware of your thoughts and your feelings and so on, being able to make responsible decisions, having good relationship skills, being able to begin and sustain healthy relationships, to have a social awareness kind of the world around us, and self-management, to be able to manage our emotions, to be able to manage our behaviors in ways that support our friendships. And so opportunities that we give our kids to practice and develop these competencies are really crucial, not only for their friendships now, but for all of their relationships going forward. So what can parents do? Right now, kids are telling me that they need and desire more support from the adults in their lives to facilitate opportunities to interact with their friends. Even kids who maybe typically would be a little bit more independent have understood that during this time, families have necessarily different feelings, different circumstances, different views on getting together, on kids being together. Can they be inside? Can they be outside? Are they wearing masks outside? Are they not wearing masks outside? And so kids really want their parents' help. As one child said in a little questionnaire about what parents can do, parents can help kids connect more by allowing them to call each other or FaceTime or any other way to connect without a lot of physical contact. Kids get it. They understand that this is a little bit of a tricky social scene to navigate, and they need their parents' support and help in getting those get-togethers. But don't underestimate the power of your family time. So if we look at these pictures of things that families have done, and especially we saw a lot of this last spring and into the summer. So if you're playing a board game with your children, you are teaching them turn taking. You're teaching them how to cooperate. You're teaching them how to be a gracious winner and a good loser. You're teaching them to play for the fun of it and not to win. If you're doing a family movie night, you're teaching your kids how to negotiate. What movie are we going to see? How to compromise, how to maybe do what somebody else wants to do, to be unselfish because they really want to see that movie, or that's their preference. If you're playing a game of basketball with your child, you're teaching them a new skill. You're teaching them how to interact in a physical athletic situation. If your family is cleaning together, you're teaching them teamwork. You're teaching them how to do something for the greater good, even though it might not be the most fun thing in the world. If you have your children make cards for first responders or healthcare professionals or teachers, you're teaching them empathy. If you go on a family hike, you're teaching your kids persistence and problem solving and endurance. And so all of these skills that I think sometimes we forget about in our regular interactions with our kids are so beneficial for what they bring forward into their friendships. Now, this I came across recently in reading about children's friendships and a little bit of speculation among psychologists. Can masks have unexpected benefits for social skills? So if we look at the kids, these pictures on this screen, we are drawn to their eyes. And we are making inferences right now about how these kids are feeling, even though we can't see the lower half of their faces. There's some suggestion that kids right now are learning how to read other people's eyes and the expression in their eyes. Paired with the rest of body language, paired with intonation, our kids may be learning a skill as we are that we didn't necessarily and they didn't necessarily have before. So that could be something that going forward, our kids are better equipped to. And what a valuable thing to be able to focus in on someone's eyes and to see how they're feeling, to read their eyes. Now, I love when kids are so candid, because one of the ways one of my children said parents can help is to say, ask your child, are you doing okay with your friends? Check in with your child. How are your friendships? Tell me a little bit about your friendship with so-and-so. How are things going with your friends? Are you doing okay with your friends? Now, sometimes you'll hear that things are going pretty well. Sometimes you hear that things aren't going so well. Sometimes you hear actually that things are going very badly. So recently you had a program in your district about helping little people with big feelings, which was awesome. And to echo that, when little people are overwhelmed by emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join them in their chaos. Now, I know, having been through this as a parent, that oftentimes it's when we are least prepared, usually at bedtime. Everybody's like getting settled, the teeth are brushed, the showers and baths have happened. And that's when your child completely falls apart about something that happened at school or at camp or in the neighborhood involving a friendship. They cry, they melt down. I have no friends. No one likes me. This is terrible. I was left out. Eventually, we get them calm enough for them to be crying themselves to sleep practically. We leave the room completely distraught. We're wondering, what is happening? Is my child like a social outcast? Are they isolated? Are they going to become depressed or worse? We talk to our partner. We call our best friend. If we're lucky, we call our own parent and say, is this normal? What's going on? We lose sleep that night. The next morning, that same child hops out of bed, skips to breakfast, leaves to school. Bye, can't wait. We're going to play this really awesome game in gym today. We're left with a mini case of post-traumatic stress disorder, and our child is completely fine. Sound familiar? We have all been there. So it's really important for us in those moments to take a breath. Now, if you're hearing about these kinds of problems frequently, that's another story. We'll talk about that. But if this is an occasional bedtime blues kind of thing, we have to make sure we stay steady. One of the best things we can do with our kids is normalize, 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 and let them know that friendships grow and change as we grow and change. When I talk to third graders as part of our developmental guidance program and our lessons about different problems that kids encounter in their friendships, I ask them, how many of you can think of a special or best or really close friend that you had in kindergarten? Most of their hands go up. I ask them to put their hands down. And then I ask them, How many of you have the same exact special or closest or best friend now in third grade as you did in kindergarten? Not even half of the hands go up. We talk about why is that? And third graders, they know. Well, I'm in a different school, or my friend moved away, or we've been in separate classes since then, or I kind of started becoming friends with this other person, or she became friends with this other person. Or they might even say, we don't really have that much in common anymore. Third graders will say that. Or we had a lot of conflicts and we realized we weren't really good friends. So we know that we are constantly developing human beings, and especially in childhood. So sometimes friendships fade, sometimes they end, sometimes we didn't want that to happen, and it's painful. It's one of the first losses that kids can experience. But we also have to, as their parents and as educators, really talk with them about how that does happen, that it's okay, that there's nothing wrong with you if your friendship changes or sometimes may even end. And we also have to normalize conflict. There are positive outcomes of conflict. We learn how to take another person's perspective, hopefully. We begin to have a greater social understanding and the social dynamics in a relationship or in a group. We learn communication skills, how to express ourselves, even when we're angry, even when someone has hurt our feelings. We learn how to negotiate and compromise. We learn how to apologize. Hopefully, we learn how to forgive, and we learn how to move forward. I tell parents, imagine a world where our children graduate from high school and they have no idea how to resolve a conflict. We can't have kids emerge from their schooling experience never having navigated and resolved conflicts. So there are great benefits to that as well. But of course, we don't want our kids to stay in conflicts or friendships that have routine conflicts and that are hurtful. So how do we help our kids with conflicts? First of all, as you heard in the presentation about helping kids with their feelings, we have to make sure that kids develop that feelings vocabulary. So when your child is saying, I hate my friend, to be able to say, it sounds like you're really angry, or she always plays with her, she never plays with me. It sounds like you feel jealous. To help them identify and name the feeling, to bring that feelings vocabulary into their world. We have to explain to our kids that just because they have a conflict with their friend doesn't mean a friendship is over, that they have to figure out ways to solve the conflict. Not to interpret every conflict or experience with rejection as bullying. Our kids will get left out sometimes, and sometimes that's all it is. They're just left out on a given day, in a given group, in a given situation. Teasing, bullying, and conflict are three very different, distinct sets of behaviors. And we do our kids a disservice, and we do ourselves as parents a disservice if we name everything as bullying. Bullying is repeated incidents over time, very cruel behavior, purposeful. There's an imbalance of power, and the target of bullying feels worried, scared, intimidated, humiliated. That's not the case with teasing, and it's not the case with rejection and conflict. So we have to make sure we all understand what we're talking about. Encourage and role play with your child, how to talk directly to a friend. I'm sure you've all heard of iMessages. Usually we all roll our eyes when we hear about iMessages, but truly that is the way to help our kids learn to be assertive, to speak up in their relationships and friendships, to say, I feel sad when you tell me you're going to play and then you don't. Please keep your word to me. I feel annoyed when you say things that hurt my feelings. Please don't. I feel jealous when you're always hanging out with him or her and never me. Please, can we spend some time together? So giving our kids the confidence to speak up and be truthful in their relationships, not in a way that tramples over anybody else's feelings or rights, but also not letting themselves be trampled over. Remember, kids' friendships are their first relationship. If they learn in childhood to be in a relationship that is unkind, that is in some cases emotionally abusive and hurtful, then they learn that that is the bar that is set for them. And it is not a stretch to say that those kids will find themselves in unhealthy relationships in adulthood. We also have to make sure that we don't jump in to resolve the conflict for ourselves. It's very tempting when our child is hurt and upset and angry and sad to solve it. And that might include trying to call or contact the other child's parent. Often that does not go well. We all want to defend our kids, and that is true of the other parent too. If the conflict is happening at school, if there is a bullying or situation at school that involves teasing, repeated teasing, then let the school help you to intervene. That way a neutral person can be involved. Because remember, you're hearing one side of the story. We're all going to tell our side, and we're going to tell it in a way that favors us and maybe leaves out the parts that maybe we're not so proud of. The same is true for children. So we have to really take with a grain of salt the story that we hear from our kids. It doesn't mean they're lying, but it does mean that they're telling it from only their point of view, and we don't have the full, complete story. And very importantly, dissuade your child from handling conflicts over a device. I have never seen a conflict get de-escalated over text or social media. Now, I love and wish I had coined this phrase, interview for coping, not for pain, by Lawrence Cohen. Interviewing for coping looks like this. Your child comes home from school and says, the kids were so mean to me at recess, I got left out, nobody likes me, I hate school. You talk it through with them. But the next day they come home and right away you say, did you get left out at recess today? Were the kids mean to you? Did anybody hurt your feelings? Did you have a miserable recess? Were people unkind? Were they ganging up on you? That's interviewing for pain. Interviewing for coping is 3 questions and 3 questions only. What did you try in order to handle it? How did it work? And what else can you do? This helps kids develop coping strategies. Now, of course, we're going to empathize with them. Of course, we're going to reassure and comfort them. But we're not going to get pulled in to the pain of it, and we're not going to then perpetuate the pain. Remember, if your child is here in terms of their emotional kind of response, and we're here, we can absolutely believe our kids will come up to join us in the pain and in the despair and in the distraught feelings. So we have to be careful that we really stick to those questions, and we'll create problem-solving creatures. But along those lines, beware the negative self-talk trap, especially after 7 p.m. I hate myself. No one likes me. I have no friends. I'm a loser. I'm the worst kid in the whole class. Again, most of these comments are going to happen at bedtime. We are going to be tempted as adults, because we love our kids and we want to reassure and comfort them, to jump in with a lot of praise and reassurance. What do you mean? You're very popular. You have tons of friends. You had 3 play dates last week. You've got an invitation to a birthday party next week. Your teacher says that everybody loves you. Now, that might seem like a good response, but the problem with it is that it inadvertently rewards the negative self-talk. And even if kids are not purposely using the negative self-talk to get lots of praise or reassurance, unconsciously, they do kind of realize, wow, when I say this, I get lots of praise and reassurance. So instead, it's best to name the feeling, but also not allow the negative self-talk, because it can be a very bad cycle of behavior that then does damage a child's sense of self-esteem. We also know that kids who regularly engage in negative self-talk can become more pessimistic. They can also become more depressed. So it's better to say, it's okay to feel hurt. It's not okay for you to say mean things about yourself. Or it's okay to feel sad. But in this house, we don't say mean things about ourselves. We would, if we have more than one child, we would never allow one of our children to say, I hate you, you're worthless, to their sibling. We can't allow them to say it to themselves either. It is a very slippery slope. So again, name the feeling, set a rule in your house. We don't use that. But also pay attention to how this negative self-talk is being delivered. If it's done in the heat of the moment at bedtime, they're angry, they're tired, they're falling apart, but then you don't necessarily hear it again. The next morning, they're okay. The next evening, they're okay. This is not pervasive. Then you're probably okay with using that strategy. However, if you are finding that your child is often in a very sad voice saying things like, no one likes me, I have no friends, and you can see that there's this deep hurt, and it can happen at any point of the day in any conversation, then it's time to explore a little further. Reach out to the teacher, reach out to the school counselor, see what's going on. How is your child presenting socially at school? Do they have friends? Do they interact well? Do they seem withdrawn or isolated? So get a little bit more information if you're hearing this kind of negative self-talk routinely. Kids have spoken about the quality of their friendships now as a result of COVID. One says, after not seeing my friends for months in quarantine, we eventually got together and had fun, so I know I have a healthy relationship with my friends. Another, it showed me the real side of my friends and who my true friends are. The other, you can be with the toxic or the ones who have trust in you. And not everyone is good for you. When we're talking to kids about friendships, key questions to ask. Do you feel good when you're with your friend? Do you feel good about yourself when you're with your friend? Do you feel good when you're with your friend? Do you feel good about yourself when you're with your friend? If the answer to one of those questions is no, that is not a healthy friendship. And your child is going to need your help, and probably the teachers and maybe the school counselors' help, to maybe start to fade that friendship, but at the same time, strengthen other friendships that have the potential to be more healthy. No child is going to walk off into the wilderness by themselves. They can't leave an unhealthy friendship unless they have somewhere to go. So that's where we can get involved and help them. When I do presentation about understanding girls' friendships, we talk a lot about how girls can tend to stay in toxic friendships longer than they should. Now over to technology. Most of us would look at this picture a year ago and say, that is outrageous. How can we have this toddler on this laptop? Well, now we have kindergartners going to school over a device in many places across this world. So while I hope we never get to this point, we know that kids are much more involved in technology than they ever have been before. And with it, there are pros and cons. Certainly, we know that kids are getting incredibly adept in using technology to learn and to interact, to be creative, to problem solve. We know that kids are getting connected with each other in ways that they did not previously have. We know that kids can have fun in their online world. But we also know that there are cons. We know that kids are being exposed to things that they shouldn't. I had a girl just this week that I was talking with. She saw something very scary on YouTube, and now she can't unsee it. You know, we don't have to actually experience trauma in person for something to be a traumatic event and for it to get locked in our nervous system, for us to unsee it. We also know that kids can be in potentially dangerous situations online, and they don't necessarily have the skills to manage that. We also know that kids can become addicted to their screens, to their devices, to their video games. And we also know that kids, especially those engaged in social media, like our 4th and 5th graders already are, that they start to compare themselves. I talked to a 4th grade girl just recently who talked about, and she can be very candid about it, I compare myself to people I see on social media. And this is, again, a concern with our kids and our young adolescents. Kids talk about this, though. They see that there are some pros to the technology world for their friendships as well. I've actually made some new friends online, one says, so there's an upside to everything. Another says it's much easier to talk to someone online, and that is both a good and bad thing. It is easier to talk about things you like through text, but in real life, it may be awkward. And this is a fifth grade boy who is a little bit more reticent in person and a little more comfortable when he interacts with kids over text. So let's think about our young adolescents. Neurologists and neuroscientists define adolescence and the adolescent brain as ages 10 to 25, where there's a high degree of plasticity in the brain, and when the social reward centers and the risk-taking centers of the brain are highly active. So our fourth and fifth graders are absolutely young adolescents. We need to talk with them about media balance. How much time are they spending online and what are they doing? We need to talk with them about making sure they pause for people so that they are not engaged in their devices to the exclusion of their in-person interactions. And I know, again, during this last year, that has been really challenging. But as the world opens up again, we want to make sure our kids are engaged in face-to-face, in-person activities. We need to teach them to think before they post, and that is the acronym, is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, and kind. If it does not meet all of those criteria, then don't post it. We have to talk to kids about their online image. How are they presenting themselves online? How do they look to others online? How are they engaging with others online? Do they forget that on the other side of the screen, there is a human heart that can be hurt? Are they posting whatever pops into their mind? Along those lines, to talk with kids about digital drama. They know what drama is, the drama that they see on the playground. Well, digital drama is not unlike that, except it can be more hurtful as people pile on. I use common sense media when we have our digital citizenship lessons and units in our guidance program. It is the best resource for parents on helping kids navigate all kinds of media, commonsensemedia.org. They have an incredible video called Teen Voices Talk About Digital Drama. It's actually, I think, in like the 6th grade age group, but it is perfect for 4th and 5th graders to help them understand and deal with digital drama. We need our kids to understand what cyberbullying is. Yes, cyberbullying is different than bullying. Bullying has repeated incidents over time, but one incidence of cyberbullying meets the criteria for cyberbullying because, as I read in an article once, meanness multiplies. That one post, that one text, that one nasty comment has legs, and it can be incredibly hurtful and humiliating and damaging to kids. So helping them learn how to recognize cyberbullying, helping them learn how to manage it and handle it, respond to it. So seek to understand, keep the conversation going. It's an ongoing conversation. Be mindful of what we as adults are modeling. Our face is buried in the phone all the time. Are we addicted to video games? Are we posting constantly on social media? And when you're concerned, intervene, don't wait. Kids talk about how they have learned to be better friends online. You need to be able to be kind virtually for them to work, one child wrote in her friendship questionnaire. Another points out it's easier to fight in text than in real life. And it's important to love your friends even over Zoom. Kids have appreciated that technology has been able to keep them connected during this time. Now, if you're the parent of a 2nd or 3rd grader, these will be very familiar video games to you. And most of my 2nd and 3rd graders are engaged minimally in these Roblox and Minecraft games, but also others. So what do they need from us? They need our oversight. They need our communication around what are they playing. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And again, they need balance. If your child is unable to extract him or herself from a video game without a meltdown, that is a sign to you that this is now not in balance and it's time to pull it back in. I believe you're having a whole other presentation about being in the cyber world, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, but here are some things that we can ask our kids about video games. First, tell me about the games you like. What do you like about them? If you get a child talking about a video game, they are the experts, and kids like to be the experts on something. So let them educate you. Let them show you the game. Even if you see it for 10 minutes, you will have a greater understanding of what they are so enamored with and enthralled with in the game. Who are you playing with? They'll say, oh, my friends. Well, who do you mean by friends? Are these people you know in person? How old are they? What color hair do they have? Where do they live? And most importantly, how do you know? And our young kids who sometimes they're becoming a little more savvy and they've had good coaching from parents and educators on this, will know that maybe somebody is not who they say they are. But other kids will look at me wide-eyed when I do these lessons. Well, because they have the picture there and they're a kid. So we need to talk about that. We need to talk about what they're being asked to share online, what they can and cannot share online. What are your parental controls? What are you allowing for your kids to do online? Who can they communicate? Who can they play these games with? So to prepare them for things that are going to come up. How do you know that that person is an 8-year-old who lives in Pennsylvania? How do you know that's not a 23-year-old who lives in Australia? And what are some ways you can keep games safe, fun, and friendly? And have your kids list those ways that they can keep games safe, fun, and friendly. And again, on Common Sense Media, under their digital citizenship lessons, there are great resources, wonderful 2-minute videos that you can watch with your child. And one of them is called Keeping Games Fun and Friendly Online. So 3 questions parents of gamer kids should ask themselves immediately. First, do your children distinguish the life world from the game world? And I love this because I've been referring to real life. And actually, I did a presentation and someone in the audience say, you know, for kids, this is real life. So I prefer this, the life world to the game world. Do your children understand the difference between what's inside the screen and what's behind it? And I don't just mean the technology there, but the commercialism. What are they selling? What is being promoted? What is being taught? What is being modeled in that game? Are we as adults modeling appropriate screen behaviors and human relationships for our kids? Kids also have talked about different ways to experience friendships. They say, for example, friendship is not just about playing together. And one thing COVID-19 has taught me about friendship is that you can still connect to them online, even if you can't see them in person. You can live with just online friendships. It's somewhat harder and harder to connect, but you can always make distance visits too. So when should you get support for your child? When do friendship problems and conflicts and difficulties begin to really require more intervention? My district transitioned to virtual in October. We were to hybrid in October. We were virtual for the whole month of September. And through October and the beginning of November, I had a lot of kids self-refer, sign up to see me. But I had a number of students, completely independent and unrelated to each other, sign up to see me. And when they would come and sit in my office, and they're about 8 feet away from me at the end of a table with their mask on, and I asked them what they want to talk about, they would say, I'm here because my dog died. And I would say, I'm so sorry. When did that happen? 2 years ago? 1 year ago? 6 months ago? And this happened enough times that I realized this was how kids were naming and expressing the grief that they have felt during this pandemic. Almost in every case, they would then promptly burst into tears. They would let out the grief about a tangible loss, but really they were expressing the losses that they felt that they wouldn't necessarily be able to name. And many of them have grieved the loss of friendships, that they have not been able to spend time with the same kids that maybe they easily could get together with and spend time with before the pandemic. Stress and pandemic fatigue too, as we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary, and especially over this past winter where the sledding and the snow people building, that was a great diversion for kids, But the long gray winter definitely affected some. And I have had conversations with parents about their kids who have been kind of maybe down or irritable or uncharacteristically, kind of aggressive at home. So kids feel the lack of sunlight too. Kids can respond to that. And the cold, long winter and the stress and the pandemic fatigue definitely have played a role. So kids have experienced that, and we need to be mindful of that and talk about it with them. Just as we talk about grief, what is grief and why is it a different feeling than just being sad? How can we handle grief? How can we handle stress? Making sure that your child has at least one thing every week that they are really looking forward to. And it doesn't have to be a big extravagant event, but one thing that means a lot to them, one thing they really enjoy to help catapult them into this next time, to let them know that grief and stress are a normal part of the human experience, even though they're really challenging, to share how you've handled grief, to share your stress strategies. But also to know when to seek support. Now, we know that most kids don't have 10 close friends. Most kids on average have about 3 to 5 close friends in elementary school. But we also know that if a child has one close friend, that is a protective factor, that is really what we would look to as that child is at least engaged in one good, close, healthy friendship. If your child has no friends, then that's time to intervene, to, again, talk with your child's teacher, to talk with the school counselor, to possibly consider getting your child some therapy to help them build social skills, or to kind of find out what the underlying difficulty might be. If your child is sad, withdrawn, or highly anxious, that's the time to galvanize and get support for them. Extremes in behavior. If your child has always by temperament, been maybe a little bit more challenging, then your challenging child is probably not news to you. But if your child is beginning to exhibit extremes in behavior that are new, then it's time to seek some support. And I don't mean just like for a couple of days or a week. We know that just like when our children are babies, if they go through a growth spurt, they're ravenous, they're tired, and they sleep. That process happens all the way up through the time they have hit their full adult height. So kids are going to go through rough times. They're sick or whatever. I've often said, I admire child psychiatrists, child and adolescent psychiatrists so much because they're always trying to treat and hit a moving target. At any given moment, children are growing, they're changing, they're developing, there are stressors. So if you're seeing though extremes in behavior, if you are calling someone and saying, my child is not like this, my child is not acting like him or herself, then it's time to get support. And again, changes in sleep and weight that are persistent. I don't just mean an off week, but persistent over time. But I am going to close in a moment on a hopeful note, not on the when to seek support note, because what I have found in the kids that I have spoken with and the kids who responded to this little questionnaire is that they have also seen the gift of friendship in perhaps a different light than they did a year ago. And they're expressing their gratitude for friendship. They're expressing their appreciation, and they're also expressing not to take friendships for granted. So one child writes, some stick with you and some leave you as if you never knew who each other were. Don't take the time you have with people for granted. It could be over in the blink of an eye or before you know it, and treasure every moment you have with the people you love. Other particularly poignant quotes. Life is precious. Make every moment count with your friend. These are from 4th and 5th graders. And last, make the best of who you have close to your heart. Thank you all for being here tonight. I will stick around for questions, and I appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you, Catherine. That was, boy, I was taking notes over here, so I'm so glad I was at my desk. So thank you so much. Some questions that we could use, to ask kids on a daily basis, and I really appreciate that knowledge. Anyone joining us tonight, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be happy to answer them right now. Anything that you might think of, even anything that you would like. If you haven't yet, also please put your name and your child's name and school in the chat. A reminder, the chat is only for us. The Q&A is for the global. Okay. Just a reminder that this will be recorded. We understand that you're at home and sometimes there are distractions happening around you. So please take a moment at another time and watch the recording again or spread the word to a friend in the neighborhood. We would greatly appreciate that. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel and Valerie.
Absolutely.